Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this IDG. And I told Kabir yesterday that unfortunately, the big build-up that happens before all his interviews that I have seen on the videos, this ain't going to happen because we all feel a sense of ownership as far as Kabir is concerned. Because I don't know how many of us have met you, Kabir, but we just feel that you're one of us. So welcome to this informal discussion group. And
we're all from the same tribe. We are all from the same tribe.
We're all from the same tribe. We will.
I'm hearing some sounds in the background.
Can I request everybody to mute themselves, please? Thank you. Thank you. So I have a bunch of questions for you, Kabir, and some of them are from the book, some of them are outside the syllabus, as you may say. But the idea is to get to know you better as a person through the book and through your all your life experiences. So let's start at your at the beginning. You know, you have had a childhood which has been quite interesting. But when you look back at your childhood, what is that everlasting memory that you have of your childhood?
You know, first, let me just say one thing, Sonu. I'm speaking to a very familiar audience in one sense, but also a very unfamiliar audience in another sense. Familiar because we're all from the same tribe. We all come from St. Stephen's. We've all gone through the same process. Unfamiliar because normally when I talk about my book, I'm talking to audiences who haven't read my book. And this is a case where I presume that most of you have actually read my book. Therefore, it is an extremely different audience that I'm talking to, where I can presume that you know certain things about me and certain things in my life. Now, as you know, my life has been a fairly tumultuous roller coaster. And it all began really in my childhood, because from my earliest memories of Kashmir to the days that I spent in Delhi, constantly moving houses, constantly hearing these wonderful conversations from my parents, meeting extraordinary people, and even getting into St. Stephen's. All those things form the corpus of my early years and my early memories. And a lot of it is to do with the wealth of information I got from my parents. A lot of it is to do with the uncertainty of my existence, because we were constantly moving homes, shifting bases. And it was a feeling of great unsettledness, not having a home of your own. And I think that quest eventually, as I explained in my Hollywood years, led me to take some huge financial risks, which ended up in disaster. But I think the enduring image I have of my childhood is the influence of my parents on me. They were people of an extraordinary generation, a generation that really believed in idealism, a generation that was willing to give their lives for causes that they believed in. I mean, here was a couple that came. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Here was a couple that met in Oxford, married in Oxford, could have come back to India after graduating from there and got the best civilian jobs in the country, as had my father's brother, who was a sessions judge and a member of the Indian Civil Service. But they sacrificed everything. So that passion of thinking about others, caring about others, and that social concern has always been a part of my life and has shaped me in many ways in terms of the way I look at people and feel about people.
Yeah.
The other thing was the religious influences that came into my life, because on one side there was the Sikh tradition from my father, on the other side the Buddhist tradition from my mother. Plus, in my growing up years, especially at St. Stephen's, I would go and hear Jiddu Krishnamurti at the Constitution Club. and I would read about all the different philosophers, wanting to know what was the truth, what was reality, what should I believe, what should I not believe. So that question that I had for about life and existence, that always remained with me throughout my life.
Yeah.
So I had a number of these influences that shaped me from those years.
So you've talked about a lot of these experiences, and then when you joined college, you were also part of the Shiksha, I'm sure.
And the Social Service League,
So all your varied experiences, do you think that they've helped you to become a better actor?
Acting was always a hobby of mine. I started acting at the age of 7, as I said in my book, in a play in Nizamuddin that was entered to the Shankars competition and won, which was my first success as an actor. I had been blown away by Prithviraj Kapoor's performance, which I saw at the age of 7 in Srinagar when he played Pathan. And then when I came out of the hall, he was standing there with his eyes closed and his arms out, asking for alms from people. And that image has always stayed with me. And I continued acting in Sherwood, continued acting at in college. And in college, I didn't just act in college, I did 3 plays with Lady Irwin College as well. And I did a play with Joy. Huh?
I said, that must have been interesting with Lady Irwin College.
Yeah, and Ritu Kumar, one of the famous fashion designers of today, was acted opposite me in one of them.
Great.
And I did a play with Joy Michael also of Yathri. So acting was like a hobby for me. And when I came to Bombay and joined advertising, it was my great and enormous good fortune that Alec Padamsee happened to be my boss at Lintas. And because of his being there and him knowing that I was interested in acting and had acted a lot, he cast me in Tughlaq, which then led to my film career, which led to Sandokan, etc. So I don't know whether it was all those influences that led to my becoming an actor or a better actor. All I can say is I was always very fond of acting and loved the process. And even from my school days, would get a huge thrill of performing on the stage. And I had good diction, I had a good voice, and I did well at it naturally. I think in college, Roshan Seth was probably the best actor. Aftab Seth was probably the second best actor. I would class myself below them as actors because they were such consummate actors. For me, it's a job that I do well. I enjoy doing it. I do it well, but it's not a defining passion in my life. It's not something that I live for and I die for and I think about day and night.
Yeah.
It's a job I do, and I think I do it well.
Yeah.
And at times I've done it very well, at times I've done it very badly. It depends on my level of interest in the film.
Yeah. So before we come to your Lintas and Bombay and Bollywood and then international fame, there were 2 things in the book that intrigued me. One was that you said that you were not all that rich, but you still lived in the most expensive real estate, I guess, in India, Amrita Shergill Marg. You had rented.
No. Yeah.
So one was, how did you manage to do that? And 2, what are your impressions about a person that you call Auntie Indira?
Auntie Indu.
Auntie Indu, sorry, my bad.
Yes. Well, firstly, money was always a problem. And what I had rented, see, I lived in college, I was in Rudra North, and I spent most of my college years there. But in my last year, while rehearsing for a play outside college, we were rehearsing a play in Miranda House. And it was a play called See How They Run. And there was a lot of running around in the play. And once while running off the stage, the front side of the stage, I lost my footing, tried to do a somersault and land on my feet, missed, and the edge of the last step caught my spine. So I was incapacitated and I couldn't sit for that year's exam. Therefore, I had to wait 1 year to complete the exam. And in that 1 year, I left the hostel and I rented these digs, a 1.5 room tenement in this house of 16 rooms, which was owned by an old widow. Of course, in a very tony building. It was a lovely large room, and it was shared by 3 people. It was shared by me, a chap called Arup Roy, and a chap called Larry Bantelman. 3 boys rented 1.5 rooms. And we
Shergill Marg. Please do not forget that.
No. We were slumming in Amrita Shergill Marg.
Great. Sorry, carry on.
Regarding your second question about Auntie Hindu.
Auntie Hindu.
You know, Rajiv and Sanjay and I became friends when I was at the Mrs. Goba's Montessori School on Haley Road in Delhi. And we remained friends, and they'd invite me over, and we'd go and play at the house and go to their birthday parties and ride. I learned horse riding on the horse of Rashtrapati Bhavan. And it remained a wonderful friendship. And Auntie Hindu was just Auntie Hindu because she was at that time the hostess and assistant to her father, Jawaharlal Nehru. He was the Prime Minister. And Panditji, of course, we had great reverence for because he was Panditji and he was the Prime Minister and all. Auntie Hindu was Auntie Hindu. Who was to know that she would become the most powerful ruler in India? And because of the closeness to the Gandhi family, we would get to see the Republic Day parades from the best seats in town. We would get to meet all kinds of dignitaries that came visiting. It was a wonderful thing. But as I grew older and I moved to Bombay, I sort of lost touch with them. But I must say, Indira Gandhi was very good to my family. She helped actually pay for part of my sister's education at Miranda House. She was very kind to my mother. She was the one who recommended to her father that she head the Misamari refugee camps for the Tibetans because she knew of her work in Kashmir with the refugees, and she knew that she was a Buddhist also. So a social welfare work, and she'd also been the editor of a magazine called Social Welfare, which is the government magazine. So a combination of social welfare, Buddhism, and refugee experience got her the Misamari job, which again transformed her life because she discovered a whole new form of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, whereas she'd first discovered Buddhism through the Burmese school, the South Asian school, the yellow robe monks of the Theravada. And so Auntie Hindu was a very important figure in our life. And I have many things to thank her for. Although politically there are things I question, but as a person, she was very kind to the family.
So again, staying on in Delhi, after college, then you worked with both Doordarshan DD and AIR. And you did a program called Mirror of the Week, I think, at DD.
Mirror of the World.
Mirror of the World. And what struck me when I read it was that it seemed like a precursor to what Pranoy did, and he called it The World This Week, you know, taking these little news clips from Viz News and putting them all together. But I suspect that Pranoy Roy was paid oodles more money than what you were paid by, you know.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. I was paid absolute peanuts. Yeah. While even though it became the most popular program on Doordarshan at the time.
Noise, yeah.
But you know, peanuts or not, those are the things that helped me pay for my college because of the family circumstance. I had to work my way through college, and it was radio and television where I made my money with some being a tourist guide on the side, to show people the delights of the Red Fort and the Qutub Minar and Humayun's tomb, etc. So between the 3, I managed to pay my fees. The first year's fees was actually given to me very kindly by the Maharaja of Sikkim, who supported my mother's work. And I thought, being a Maharaja, he must have some money. So I said, sir, can I have 15,000 rupees to pay for my first year's expenses? He says, are you sure that's all you want? I said, that's fine, I'll manage the rest. He gave me 15,000 and the rest was paid for.
Some of money at that time. I mean, you must have really lived it up.
No. St. Stephen's wasn't cheap even by those days' standards. And it was for the year. And it was eating, rent, lodging, everything. Yeah. So I managed the first year. And within that first year, I did enough to save up and earn the future years to see me through.
Yeah.
So by the time I left Delhi, I had 700 rupees in my pocket.
Yeah. So before you leave Delhi, you did something else which has stayed with you for the longest time. And unfortunately, none of us have been able to hear that, is your interview with the Beatles. You've described it graphically in your book, but for some of us who haven't read it, can you take us through how did you manage to interview the Beatles and what were they like?
See, I was a crazy fan of the Beatles. Not just because they were the Beatles, but you know, there was a whole wave sweeping the world in those days where hippies were all over the place, a whole new order was being ushered in, and Carnaby Street made psychedelic clothes fashionable. People were demonstrating for peace for the first time in history. There was social change in the air in a quantum way. It's not just a generational change, the whole world seemed to be changing in the 60s and 70s. And the Beatles very much represented that particular change to us. And of course, I adored their music. So when I heard through the grapevine that they had come to Delhi, and I knew why they'd come, they'd made an unscheduled stop on the way back from the Philippines, where they'd been in a lot of trouble with the government for refusing to sing songs at the birthday party of dictator Marcos's children. I knew all this, but I went to my bosses and thought, let me get the AIR badge to go and interview them. So when I asked them to give me a tape recorder, they laughed at me. They said, the whole of Delhi is trying to get in there. Journalists are trying to get, how are you going to get in there? I said, give me the tape recorder, let's see what happens. So I went there, I got into the hotel with my press badge, and everyone was looking for the Beatles. I was looking for the manager. And I knew who he was and I knew what he looked like. So I just doggedly watched the lifts while everyone else was prowling around or downstairs at the kitchen entrance, etc. So when he came down and he started walking towards the exit, towards the hotel entrance, I accosted him. I said, sir, I'm Kabir Bedi from All India Radio. The government has scheduled an interview with the Beatles, sir. And he turned around, he was not interested. I said, sir, it's a government matter. There'll be a big problem if they don't do the interview. And that got his attention because he'd already been in problem with one government just the day before. And I knew his vulnerability. And I was very smart about it. I played on that word government, government, government every time I talked to him. In the end, he said, the boys will not give an interview to anybody. I will do the bloody interview. Good enough for me, an interview with Brian Epstein. Hey, who was I to complain? So when I went to his room, I made arrangements, went up to his room. He was looked extremely unwell. He was sweating, he was pale, he was wearing a bathrobe. And he'd open the door after I knocked 3 times. And I said, sir, Kabir Bedi from All India Radio, sir, for the interview. Oh God, he said, I can't do this now. So he slammed the door in my face again. I was worried. I thought, what's going to happen? I was about to knock again. He appeared wearing trousers over his bathrobe, walked me across the length of the Oberoi's floor to the room at the other suite at the other end of the floor, knocked on that door and said, boys, do me a favor, give this guy an interview. And I was in with the Beatles. So then I wrote about what happened in the interview, etc., which is worth reading about. Yeah. But it was just sheer fan frenzy, professional determination, sensing an opportunity, and just, not refusing to accept a no.
Yeah. No, so I found that quite fascinating. And this is what we Indians call the jugaad. Kisi bhi tarah se you have to get that interview with So you've talked about the individual Beatles in the book, but again, one enduring memory of any of the Beatles?
For me, John Lennon is always the enduring memory of the Beatles. Paul was lovely and friendly. George was very cerebral and had a spiritual angle to him. Ringo had a nice human kind of warmth in his eyes, but John Lennon for me was God. And for John Lennon to be kind to me, and in the end I said to him, I want to give you a hug. And he didn't do it, but he very artfully put his arm around me and guided me to the door. That was enough for me. That was enough for me. That memory of John Lennon guiding me to the door remains with me forever.
Yeah, I don't think any of us, or many of us, have had the good fortune of being engulfed in half a hug from John Lennon. So I'm sure that you cherish it. Okay, then you move your self to Bombay and you join Lintas. And Rahul Singh, who's also, joined in today, told me yesterday that his father and your father were great friends, and that
Yes.
You got in touch with him and then joined Lindas. So, what made you choose advertising? And tell us the story of how you ended up at Lindas.
Well, it is true that Khushwant Singh and my parents, their relationship actually went back to the Lahore days when my parents lived in these things called the huts, which are literally huts with no electricity, no running water, a buffalo tethered outside for milk, and all the leftists would come and hang out there. And those days leftists meant Gyani Zail Singh, Har Krishan Singh Surjit, Inder Gujral became Prime Minister, Satish Gujral, the artist, many, many figures of that time, Sheikh Abdullah of Kashmir, all these were the lefties that would gather in the huts. So that relation, but Khushwant wasn't one of the lefties, but he was certainly a very big sympathizer of the independence cause, and had that relationship with my parents since then. Being a journalist and being in the Delhi circle, we met Khushwant Singh a number of times over the years. Khushwant wasn't directly involved in my getting the job in Lintas. That I got through a chap called Janki Gaur, who was my friend in Delhi, that recommended me to Jason Dakuna. And Jason liked me, and eventually I got the job in Lintas. But Khushwant was always very supportive of me. He absolutely adored a short story that I wrote, which I've included in my book, which he published in the Illustrated Weekly of India, and then published in the collection of best Indian short stories selected by Khushwant Singh, Volume 1. Yeah. And so I've had and I met him in Europe, I met him in Delhi. There was always an ongoing relationship, and I have the greatest respect for Khushwant and for Rahul for that matter, because Rahul has kept his legacy alive with the film festival that he holds in Kasauli in the memory of Khushwant Singh. And has done the literary festival. Has done a fantastic job. And I have great admiration for all Rahul has done.
Great. So now that you're at Lintas, did you join the agency with the hope of becoming an actor? Or
no.
A producer?
To become a director.
Oh, director.
Because when I was thinking of, after I left All India Radio in disgust, after they erased and recorded over my interview with the Beatles, because they said we don't have money for tapes. That was my turning point. I left. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I thought about all the options: foreign service, administrative service, journalism, tourist guide. Various things went through my mind. I thought of producing films, but I didn't have any money. And I thought, I liked the idea of directing, because what I'd learned while doing Mirror of the World and putting these film clips together and editing them together and putting sound on them, I loved that whole process. So I thought a filmmaker is what I'd love to be. And I'd grown up, on these wonderful films of Mother India and Pyasa and Do Bigha Zameen and the classics of Fellini and David Lean and De Sica and all these great Italian directors. So it was exciting. So I came to Delhi, to Bombay, because I thought the only way I can learn the film craft better is by making advertising films, which is why I applied to Lintas. And a long story how I got in, but finally I got into Lintas. And I honed my craft as a director. But then Alec cast me in these plays, and that led to film offers. Then I thought, theek hai, people are offering me roles as an actor. Industry में घुस जाओ, बाद में देखें क्या होता है, कुछ कॉन्टैक्ट मिल जाएंगे, डायरेक्टर बन जाऊंगा. तो डायरेक्टर बनते बनते बात बनी नहीं. Instead, the acting continued, and one thing led to another. And my first big hit was Raj Khosla's Kache Dhage, and a lot more people came. Then some films flopped, then some people, again, I had a problem. And then the Italians came, and a whole new chapter began in my life. Yeah. So I never returned to directing, because acting, in effect, took over my life. Yeah. And I just went with the flow.
Yeah. So you mentioned Kache Dhage. Now, Kache Dhage had these two alpha males as the heroes, you know, Vinod Khanna and you. So how did the two alpha males deal with each other? What was the chemistry like between Vinod Khanna and you? And you do mention in the book that you became good friends, thereafter. But two strong alpha males together in a movie, fighting for screen space. Just tell us a little more about that, please.
It's a lovely question, because initially when Raj Khosla cast Vinod and me, there was rivalry, because as you said, two alpha males wanting to do this. I'm not much of an alpha male, actually.
Yeah, that's what you say. That's not your image, Kabir.
I know it's not my image. My image may be alpha male, but I really am quite an introvert. But professionally, there was a rivalry, because the two good-looking guys, vying for screen time and all that. And
excuse me, I love the way that you say I'm not an alpha male, but there were two good-looking guys on the screen.
Yeah. I can't help the fact that I'm good-looking. So there was that sort of, competition for who will come across best in the film. But the fact of the matter is that in the course of the shooting, we became very good friends. Both of us rode horses very well. We gave Raj Khosla some fantastic shots of us riding horses in that whole film. And we remained friends for years. And that friendship went beyond films, because even when he came to Bombay, he was very drawn by Osho and became a devotee of Osho. I was also very, very impressed by Osho, very influenced by him. When they asked me to go to see him, they said, you have to wear this robe to meet him, etc. I said, nobody tells me what to wear. I'm sorry. I regret my ego, because I missed a great opportunity. But having said that, I still have the greatest respect for Osho and his teachings. Then, when Osho left India and went to Oregon in America, because he'd called Morarji Desai a piss drinker, and Morarji Desai went after him hammer and tongs, he was forced to leave India. He went to America and set up this community in Oregon, which actually, what happened there is the subject of a whole Netflix documentary called Wild Wild West, which should be seen, which is only part of the Osho story, but a very interesting part. Vinod came and lived with them. Those days I would live in LA, and Vinod would come down from the ashram to LA to meet me and chat with me and be with me and share what was happening in the ashram. So I had a very insider's information about what was happening in the ashram, a lot of which has been chronicled in this documentary. Then, when Osho came back to India, Vinod was again among the first to support him, and went up again and lived with him in Kullu. The important thing is that Vinod had come from a fairly well-to-do family, but whatever he earned in films, etc., all of that got spent when he was in Oregon. And he came back to India. He had to take a little room in the Automobile Club of India on Malabar Hill, a little room he took there, and restarted his career in Bollywood and made it highly successful. we remained friends over the years, meeting from time to time. And I was supposed to meet him 3 days before he passed away, and somehow I couldn't go. And then he passed away, and I was there at his funeral. And it was extremely sad to see my friend of so many years pass away, because we had bonded at so many levels. Even in politics, when he entered politics, he became the MP for Gurdaspur, which is the district in which my hometown, Dera Baba Nanak, is located. So he was my MP as well. So that relationship has always been a special one in my life.
Yeah, yeah. So then you do say that the whole rigmarole of dancing around the trees and lip syncing songs, which was required for a Bollywood hero, wasn't really for you. So I guess it was just really fortunate and good luck that Sandokan happened. But how did it come about? Did you do anything to make that happen, or was it just sheer good fortune and providence that it happened?
A bit of both. Rightly or wrongly, I fancied myself as a very serious actor who didn't want to do song and dance. Let me qualify right in the beginning. I love watching song and dance. I adore it. I compliment Ujjwal Uke for the morning Dhun Ke Sathi that he puts on and brings so much light and joy into everyone's life. I adore watching them, but I'm not the kind of singing, dancing type within myself either. So if I wanted to be a successful actor in Hindi films, I should have and would have put in a lot of effort to make sure I had that department covered well, because that was a prerequisite for becoming a successful leading man. But there was this, oh God, what was that? But there was this inner resistance within me. And then the Italians came into town. Now, the Italians came into town and asked to meet me because they'd heard of the play that I did called Tughlaq, which is Girish Karnad's first play in English, directed by Alec Padamsee. It was a spectacular hit. And the opening image of me standing looking nude with my back to the audience, again, was something that had the whole of Bombay talking. Plus the fact that I had 2 hit films behind me, therefore people were talking about me when the Italians came. So that brought the Italians to me. But then they very arrogantly said to me, you come to Italy and pay for your own way to do an audition. Now, yeah, actors have their egos, and I thought, who the hell is he to ask me? I'm not some, struggling actor that'll jump and pay his way to Italy to do an audition. But again, it's the ability to recognize opportunity. I suddenly thought to myself, if this works out, I can be an actor without having to do singing and dancing. And so I didn't make any fuss about him saying, you got to pay your own way. I agreed to the thing. I went to Italy. I nailed the audition and I got the role. So it's a bit of luck, you can say, that the Italians happened to come to India as part of an all-Asia tour to look for the best actor in Asia for Sandokan. And my own sense of my own work, which brought them to my attention, plus my ability not to stand on ceremony and to recognize the opportunity that it was, and which it in fact turned out to be, because it transformed my life completely.
Yeah. So when you did start shooting for Sandokan, and then when Sandokan became such a big hit, you were already a married man with 2 children. And in Bollywood, there's this whole hawa around, ki shadi ka batayenge to hamari sex appeal khatam ho jayegi. So how do you explain this mad adulation that you generated among, I guess, men, but certainly amongst women, I'm sure, in spite of you having publicly, it was a public known detail that you were married and with 2 kids. So how do you explain that?
Well, the fact is I went to Italy after I had left Parveen and left Pratima and started my relationship with Parveen. So I came to Italy with this very beautiful Italian actress called Italian Indian actress called Parveen Babi. So when a man comes out with a girlfriend, he's seen as available. He's not, they don't think of him as a married man. But that wasn't the issue. That was just a technicality. The fact is that Sandokan was like the Robin Hood of Italy. Every Italian child grew up reading Sandokan. But the fact is, previous films had been made on Sandokan that made no waves. This series was absolutely magical because Sergio Solima, the director, had chosen very young musicians to give it very young, fresh, new music, not the lush lyrical scores or historical, but almost pop music for this great love story. Asian pirate fighting the British, marries an English girl, falls in love with an English girl. The vast spaces of Asia, or the mysterious Orient, green jungles, blue seas, wonderful action scenes, great love scenes. It was an all-in-one package that absolutely captivated Italy. And not just Italy, it made me a star across the whole of Europe, even what were in those days the East European countries, which were communist then. So everywhere in Europe was this Sandokan mania. It was like the Beatles, you know, people just went crazy. And I've detailed that in a few instances because I didn't want to go into all the instances, it become too boring. But I did give a feeling of the kind of frenzy and fervor that Sandokan created. And that effect has continued, in a sense, till today, because technology intervened and then it got replayed on television, and then came the videos, and then came the internet. It's been sort of rebroadcast forever to every generation, as a result of which everyone from grandmothers to grandchildren in Italy know me. I'm a household word there. And Spain also was huge, but somehow I didn't pay enough attention to the Spanish market over the years. So they still know me as Sandokan, but not with the same kind of fan frenzy in Italy. In Italy, I walked on any street, I'm recognized. So in Spain, probably the older generation recognizes me. But, you know, there's a whole tribe of Sandokan fans that I'm very grateful for, and have been very dedicated fans, and have perpetuated the legend of Sandokan on the screen. And now, in fact, something even more interesting is happening. After all these years, they are finally doing a remake of the series with another actor, a Turkish actor called Can Yaman, who's a very good actor. He looks a lot like me, like I looked in the early 30s, like I looked on the cover of the book. And they are planning to release the series at the end of this year. So suddenly I'm getting all these calls from the media saying, what do you think of it? What do you think of him? What do you think of a new series? And I'm delighted. I've always said Sandokan should be remade with modern technology, because even though it set new standards at the time and broke every record at the time, it still is a thing that's 40 years old, and therefore needs to be retold in a new idiom, with new technology, with new actors, and the legend of Sandokan must be reinvented. And I'm delighted it's happening, and I can't wait to see the new series.
Yeah, yeah. So talking of the adulation that you received in Italy, and you do talk, like you say, a little about it in the book, but can you take us through that time when you almost caused the collapse of a multi-story building? Because
Yes, that happened in Spain, actually, in Madrid. As part of my tour of Madrid, and Madrid was the same. Every magazine in the country had put me on its cover. All the newspapers were covering me. Every radio station, every television station wanted to interview us. And you know, we were this glamorous couple. There was Sandokan, was this glamorous Indian actress called Parveen Babi. We were picture perfect for the media. And I was called for a book signing at this thing called the Corte Inglés, which is the biggest department store chain in Spain. So when I entered, with great difficulty, they got me through the crowd and they took me up to the top floor. And the top floor, I was pushed through the crowd to the table where I sat down. start signing the books. I signed a few books as the people were being held back by the security. I started handing them. The manager came to me and said, "You've got to leave." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the building will collapse." I laughed. I thought he was making a joke. He said, "No, the building is not designed to hold so many people on each floor, and there's people crowding every floor. So please leave, or else people will die." There was no choice. Now, getting out of there was another drama in itself. So it's they got me, the security got me to the lift. The fans pushed the security out of the lift, got in the lift with me and came down, begging for my autographs, hugging me, kissing me. Then I got out on the ground floor, more waves of fans. This could be dangerous because people start crushing against you, you know. And I went out in the street, more screens, more fans came across the road. Then I jumped onto the tops of cars and I got to the end of the street. Where I jumped, I found another car moving on the cross street, and I begged to be taken to the hotel, and for the price of an autograph, they got me there. But that is the kind of fan frenzy that I saw and experienced, which is, you know, it's the kind of thing actors dream about but rarely see. And I saw that. So those are the heights of triumphs that I saw. And yet, as you saw, I've also suffered the depths of some great tragedies. Yeah. So many things.
So again, you know, staying on in Italy, and you were such a superstar. You are such a superstar. You got this fantastic adulation. Why did you not just stay on in Italy? What made you look beyond Italy to Hollywood?
That's a very perceptive question, Sonu. There's two answers to that. One obvious one and one not so obvious. Obvious is that every actor in the world wants to go to Hollywood and be a success out there. And I thought, with this kind of success in Europe behind me, you know, I should push the envelope and go to Hollywood and make a whole new path out there. The not so obvious answer is, because Sandokan was such a success, and I was so identified with the character of Sandokan, directors told me, "You're not going to get work here. We make social films, we make comedies, we make family dramas. We can't have Sandokan walking into the film. It'll ruin it. You have to give it time. You have to go away for a while and come back in other roles. But right now, nobody can think of you as anything but Sandokan." So for these two very good reasons, I pushed on to Hollywood. And in time, I did come back and do a lot of other roles in Italy. And roles that got me huge acclaim in Italy, including comic roles, including other action roles. In the end, I was given Italy's highest civilian honor. I was made Cavaliere, which is the equivalent to being knighted, and the highest form of knighting, the highest order of knighting in Italy. So Italy remained in my consciousness, remained in my work sphere, but I moved on and lived in Hollywood for 20 years, and that's where I based myself.
So before we come to Hollywood, tell me, how did the Bollywood fraternity react to your superstardom? Because even in India, when Sandokan was released, I remember, you know, the streets of our colony used to be deserted. And at that time, I don't think we had television at home, at my home. And I think I used to go to various auntie and uncles' houses to watch Sandokan. But I remember that, you know, wo jaise bolte na, kauwe bolte the streets pe. Sandokan telecast. So how did Bollywood, which was this fiercely competitive industry, how did it react to one of its own gaining such superstardom internationally?
Italy में भी वही हाल था, सड़कों पे कौवे बोलते थे at the time of transmission. And what you're saying is music to my ears, because, you know, again, like the Beatles interview, I gave it to Doordarshan, to All India Radio, and they broadcast it without any fanfare. So many people missed it. Sandokan also, they started broadcasting without any fanfare on Doordarshan. I gave it to them for free. I went to them and said, "Please show in India what I've done in Europe." जी हमारे पास फॉरेन एक्सचेंज नहीं है, क्या करें, कोई बजट नहीं है, तो मैंने खरीद के उनको फ्री में दे दिया, फिर भी कोई कदर नहीं की। They just broadcast it without any announcements. But then once the series started, then word started spreading. And despite Doordarshan's callousness or indifference, millions did see it, like you said, in your locality, in your area, people did see it. So many people did see it, and yet many people didn't. So it didn't have the same impact in India that might have had the way it had in Italy, because I think it didn't get the promotion that it should have gotten. So I would say that Sandokan being shown in India was a very special thing for me, because being an actor that worked abroad, I wanted my success known in India. So the question is, what did Bollywood think of it? See, Bollywood heard generally कि हाँ कबीर बेदी इटली में अच्छा काम कर रहा है, कुछ pictures की बहुत hit हो गई है वहाँ. But the fact is, you know, our whole consciousness, and this for all of us, is more orientated towards England and America. If I had the kind of success in England or America that I had in Italy, it would have been the biggest news ever in India. And one of my greatest regrets is that because I was a star in Europe, India didn't clock it. The media didn't make a major fuss out of it. Many people never knew about my huge success in Italy, literally until the last 10, 15 years when I came back to India and started talking about it. I said, listen, I've been a major star in Europe on Sandokan. I started talking about it generally. And now I've written about it. So people have clocked, oh my God, yeah, he was a star in Europe. But the fact is, Europe doesn't figure in our consciousness the same way as the Anglo-American community does. So Bollywood ने कहा ठीक है हाँ भाई इटली में कुछ अच्छी पिक्चर चली है उसकी सुना स्टार बन गया, but didn't cause them to run to me and say come and be our hero out here. But yet I must say the many things I do have to thank Bollywood for. One, that they made me a professional film actor. Alec Padamsee might have caused them to cast me, but Bollywood was the place that made me a professional film actor. Number two, they've always treated me with the greatest of respect. Number three, when I was in trouble in America, Rakesh Roshan offered me Khoon Bhari Maang, a film opposite Rekha, that got me huge success in India and led to a spate of other films. Even recently, I've been in Mehuna, I was with Shah Rukh Khan, I was with Hrithik Roshan in Mohenjo-daro. There are films that I've kept doing, and I thank Bollywood for making me an all-India name, which is no small thing, and for giving me the respect that they give me.
Yeah. So do you think that your small role in Octopussy got you more recognition in Bollywood than your entire series of Sandokan?
See, my role in Octopussy as the villain actually got me worldwide fame, because there is a whole tribe of Bond movie fans across the globe who are in their hundreds of millions. So any actor who does a role of any importance in a Bond film is of great interest to them. And suddenly you get your mailboxes full of these requests for your autographs and photographs. And you probably end up, if you answer them all, you probably end up spending more than what you earned in the film. But what really got Bollywood's attention was not so much the Bond film. Yeah, that did. So it was interesting for them, but was Bold and Beautiful. Bold and Beautiful was seen all over India. I was on there for 1 year. That again is a franchise that's seen by about 300-400 million people a day. And I was on there almost a year. So those two films gave me worldwide fame in terms of the fan base. And that got Bollywood's attention. Arey yaar, Kabir Bedi, Bold and Beautiful kar raha hai, kamal ki baat hai. So every night, evening you were in their things. And that registered in India in a big way. I remember Veer Sanghvi doing an interview with me about that once I came back to India and talked about Bold and Beautiful. And it was a big deal. But I should have made more of a meal out of it when I came to India and got my own PR agency, etc. But until very recently, in fact, until my book came out, I never worked with PR agencies. or hired them anyway. People came to me from PR agencies for interviews, but I never hired PR agencies. Maybe I should have. But the fact is, all these things have helped shape my career. And I thank each of them for what they gave me. Europe for almost make me immortal as a Sandokan character. Hollywood for the worldwide fan base it gave me, despite all the problems I had there. And India for the respect it gave me and for the name it gave me and for making me a national name. So each of them has contributed to making my life and career fulfilling in so many ways when I look back on it at this stage in my life.
Yeah. So while at Hollywood, you worked with a lot of names that are known worldwide. I mean, in Bold and Beautiful, in Dynasty, in Octopussy, and the other movies that you did. I'm sure you have interesting stories about a lot of these, well-known people. Which is your favorite story about these well-known people? Is it the one about Omar Sharif?
Yeah, you have to read my book to basically know. But Omar, I did 3 films with him, and he was like an icon for me because he was the trailblazer. He was the first Asian actor that went and made a mark in Hollywood, which was huge. No other Asian had done that before. So I thought, I've got to be the next Omar Sharif. And in the films that we did together, we became very good friends. But he did have this habit that wherever he shot, especially on location, we were shooting, say, in the south of France. We were shooting many locations. Let's say the south of France. He would go down early in the morning to the kitchen and he would talk to the chef and he'd say, what can we make that we make a fabulous dinner for 10 people? And he'd plan this elaborate dinner and the wines to go with them for 10 people or 8 people, or whatever he felt like that day. Then on the set, he'd invite various people that he wanted to talk to or discover or learn more about and gather these people around the table. Or even somebody visiting the set, if he liked them, he'd say, come to dinner with me. Around this table, he'd sit, he'd watch, he was very entertaining and he'd tell stories. But he was a very intelligent man, champion bridge player, played very good chess, highly intelligent, and he got bored very easily. So once he got bored, then he would look to pick a fight. So he'd wait to watch the conversation going around. If somebody said something a little out of line, he would pounce on them or say, I think this. And so this American actor would say, well, that's your opinion, Omar. My opinion? What do you think I am? I know. You're an idiot. You know nothing. You start this fight. And the end result of these fights would be that either the person being attacked by Omar would leave the table in tears, or if the argument became unbearable, Omar would take his napkin, throw it down on the table, and walk off. He had a fight with me once. But I gave it to him as good as he got, and he respected that. So he called me for many dinners. And we had many dinners together, and we enjoyed them. And he became a great friend.
Tell us about that fight.
It was about Ronald Reagan and, it was about Kennedy winning the election and how they won the election. It was not worth getting into the details. The details were unimportant. What was important was that he thought he knew the facts better than I did. But, I have a computer brain for many general knowledge things, especially in the political sphere. So I knew my facts better than him. And even though he fought me at the time, he respected the fact that I knew. And so that was just one. Nobody that Omar had a fight with ever was called back to his table. I was the one called back many, many times. In fact, regularly. And to the end of his days, I met him. There's a lovely picture of me with him in my book. We met. In fact, that was the last time I saw him at a film festival in Ischia, in Italy. And we had, with Bud Spencer, it was wonderful to see all these giants together. And I have the fondest memories of Omar, but he was an outrageous character. He would say the most outrageous things to people. Because he was Omar Sharif, he would get away with anything.
Yeah. So now just to come to some not so pleasant aspects of your life's journey, and you've been quite candid about them in the book. So while, Hollywood did give you, again, a lot of adulation, a lot of success, but it also brought you, that was the time when you went through a lot of your personal crises as well, personal, emotional, financial, all of those. And
yes.
When I was talking to you before, you did say that it is a crisis that brings out the best in people. So all your crises which happened, how did they bring out, or what qualities did they bring out in you?
Each crisis brings out something different in you. A financial crisis and even facing bankruptcy, brings out your will to survive, to fight back, to find ways to rise again, not to accept defeat, not to be downcast, not to feel it's the end of the world, to know that you have all the things that made you what you were can remake you. And I did that. So there's a kind of, in that situation, there's either the fight or flight reaction, and I have a fight reaction. Normally I'm a fairly easygoing guy, but put me in that spot and I will fight. When it came to personal tragedies, like the death of my son, which scarred me enormously. There was a very deep wound, and it paralyzes you. It paralyzed me. It affected my work. I started failing my auditions. I started everything started going wrong. And then again, you realize that at the end of it, you have to, life has to go on. You can't let that become the only thing in your life, no matter how deeply you feel for your son. Your own life is also important, and what you're here to do and what you can do is important. So the pain of the wound decreases, but the scars remain, and the sense of hurt remains, and the loss remains. But you learn to, but you learn to live with it, and you find ways of thinking beyond it, because otherwise you can just keep obsessing on that for the rest of your life, and it would be a waste of two lives, not one. So that's why I say crisis brings out the best in you, because there comes a point where the best in you decides to fight back as to the worst that's happened to you. There's the best versus the worst.
Yeah. And you've actually bared your soul out in the chapter about your son. And I've also heard you talk at various other interviews about the need to focus on mental health issues, and also the fact that it's not only the patient who goes through that pain, it's the caregiver. And if that caregiver also happens to be a parent, he or she is wrecked with, guilt and pain and helplessness and hopelessness. Do you want to talk about that a bit, about you as a caregiver of a very dear one who's going through a mental health issue that you could not do anything about?
Well, I tried my damnedest to do something about it, and I believed we were winning the war. But the fact of the matter is, I wrote that chapter because I wanted to recapture that moment, not just for my own experience and my own journey, but also a way of showing other people what it is like to live with schizophrenia, what it is like, what it takes to treat schizophrenia, can and should or should not be done. But more than that, I think I was keen that people understand that it is not just the person afflicted with the condition that is to be sympathized and pitied. It is the people that are looking after him or her that need an equal amount of sympathy. Because in a strange way, they suffer perhaps even more because the person suffering is going through his process, but the person who is looking after them is trying to adjust to their changing moods, to their contradictoriness, to their unreasonableness, to their irrational behavior. The person you knew and loved is not the person that you see. You think it's the same person, but it's not. And to understand all that is a very deep journey. And my heart goes out to all caregivers because I was one and I know what it takes to be one. And I think the role of caregivers is underestimated and underappreciated. And I feel people should know that and also not see this as a stigma. In the same people develop physical ailments, people develop mental ailments. Today, the treatments are better, more effective. So it's not a story that is without hope. I do say today's medicines and treatments are much better. And had they been in place when my son went through it, perhaps the outcome would have been different. But that's the what ifs of history. Who knows?
Yeah, actually,
I just want people to sympathize with the caregiver as well.
Yeah, actually, what's also struck me was that you actually had two very, very close relationships where the people have had mental issues. So Parveen Bhabi also did seem to have some mental issues, and you also suffered because of that. Now since we mentioned Parveen Bhabi, and you're a much married man with many relationships, so a couple of questions about that. Do you believe that marriage is for keeps, or is variety the spice of life? And also in the women you've been married to, what is that one quality in each one of them? I mean, different qualities in different women that are enduring. So when you think of Pratima, what is that one quality that you think of? When you think of Parveen, what is that?
I'd rather not answer that because the answer is not a one word, it's far more complex, as I've shown in my book. But regarding variety is the spice of life, let me say that neither I nor most people that I know who get married ever get married with the intention of getting divorced. You always think it's going to be forever, you want it to last forever. As Sahib said, वो अफसाना जिसका अंजाम ना हो मुमकिन उसे खूबसूरत मोड़ पर छोड़ देना बेहतर.
Very nice.
Some stories can't reach its conclusion for whatever reason. I'm not ascribing blame here. It could be mine, it could be theirs, it could be joint, it could be anything. Some things are not destined to culminate in a happy ending or a long-standing relationship. If that is the case, then it's best ended at the right time in the best possible way. I take great pride in the fact that I'm friends with, or were friends with, most of my ex-wives. In fact, I've got a wonderful picture in my book of my wife, Nikki, sitting with my two ex-wives having Christmas dinner together at my house. So that is a rare achievement, as most divorced people will tell you, and to keep those relationships alive and well. Because for whatever reasons you couldn't live together, you couldn't continue the marriage together, that's one thing. Question is what happens after that? Do you still have a mutual respect for each other? Do you still find ways of relating as human beings and remembering what brought you together and rising above the differences that parted you? So I think I achieved that to a large measure in my relationships. And I have given and got a lot from all the relationships I went through, whether they ended in divorce or not. But I'm happy to say that the most satisfying relationship that I've had is with my wife, Parveen Dosanjh, who has given me the kind of fulfillment that I always sought in relationships. So it might have taken a couple of tries to get there, but I got there in the end. I believe in marriage, I believe in love, and I believe that life is meant to be shared.
Right. So before we end, 2 quick questions. Besides perfectly fried eggs on hot toast, what gives you happiness?
You know, happiness is when you do something well and it's appreciated. It really comes down to as simple as that. It could be frying an egg well. It could be doing a great role well. It could be writing a book like I just did. And I feel that I've written it well and it's appreciated. In fact, yesterday in the Quint, there was a fabulous review of my book. I received a few great ones in the Tribune as well, etc. But that feeling of satisfaction of a job well done, that to me is happiness.
Right. And the last question. You may not have worked with all of them, but who, according to you, is the most liberated and bohemian actress in Bollywood? Parveen Babi excluded.
Parveen Babi gave the image of being liberated and bohemian. She was really a very conservative Gujarati girl at heart. She was a very possessive, monogamous, believing in all the traditional virtues. The fact that we didn't get married was, as I've said in my book, or revealed in my book, that she was married at the time already and the marriage she couldn't get out of. Yeah. But she was a very conservative girl. Now, who is the most bohemian actress in Bollywood? I wouldn't dare answer that question.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording and then maybe you could. Let me just say thank you first and then stop recording. So thank you, Kabir. I think it's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation with you. I've really enjoyed it. And we look forward to more of these.